Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I am your host, JP John Paz. With me today, very special guest. He's a 1993 NASCAR Rookie of the Year. He's of course a announcer, obviously a race car driver. He was of course a pro wrestler at one point and a promoter. Mr. Hermie Sadler. Hermie, welcome. How you doing?
I appreciate you having me on the show. How are you tonight?
Doing very good. What's going on in your world?
A lot, a lot. As you mentioned, I will have to say, by pretty much anybody's standards, I've lived a very interesting life, no question about it. Very fortunate to have been able to do some very cool things in my life. You mentioned years on the racetrack and about 17 years working for Fox Sports and a lifelong wrestling fan. So through all of those years, I have made a lot of friends in the NASCAR community, made a lot of friends in the wrestling industry, and now I guess you would call living a boring life. My wife and I own some convenience stores and truck stops and restaurants, and so we're in the retail business, based right here in Emporia, Virginia, at the intersection of I-95 and 58, and but just loving working a quote unquote normal job, and I got three beautiful daughters. Um, as of about a month ago, my first granddaughter, so I'm enjoying the heck out of
Congrats.
that, and getting to do a lot of things that I missed while I was working and traveling and racing and doing other things, catching up on a lot of fun things involving my family, and life is good right now. So I appreciate you asking.
With the wrestling business, like you said, you're a lifelong fan. What did you grow up on? What were you a fan of?
Well, my dad used to take my brother. We grew up in the Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling days, the Crockett days.
Oh yeah.
So we spent some time going over to the WRAL in Raleigh had like a little small television studio where they taped NWA World Championship Wrestling. They did the same over in Richmond. We went to the Richmond Coliseum. We went to Dorton Arena in Raleigh. I mean, all the places. And I grew up. The first wrestler that I remember being a huge fan of, that ironically I became a good friend with later in life before he passed, was Wahoo McDaniel. And Wahoo, lived not too far from Charlotte, which I never moved to Charlotte, but I had a condo in Charlotte for many years while I was racing and working for Fox Sports. And so Wahoo and I became friends, but I just love that era of wrestling. Wahoo, Paul Jones, Johnny Weaver, Ric Flair. That era of wrestling was what I grew up on, and so became a fan, remained a fan, and now some of my best friends that I still have to this day are either were or still are involved in professional wrestling. So um, have a lot of great friends, and I'm proud of that.
When you look at wrestling, I know obviously you became a star for NASCAR and a driver, and like you said, you were on TV doing announcing for all those years. But as far as wrestling, did you always want to be like a wrestler? Was that like a goal of yours, or not? You never want to be a wrestler?
Never wanted to be a wrestler. It never crossed my mind. Basically, I grew up as a kid, as a fan. We went to shows when we could. My dad carried us, and but my involvement in wrestling really started. Uh, um, you know, I met Jeff Jarrett in the early 1990s, and Jeff and I are close in age, and he and his first wife Jill had three daughters, just like I did, three daughters, and all three of our daughters were very close in age. So we used to vacation a lot together. Became just friends outside of my livelihood and his. So my friendship with Jeff, who I still I consider Jeff one of my best friends to this day. Of course, now he's married to Karen, and I have a special needs daughter, and my middle child has special needs, and so I have a special bond with Jeff and Karen's son Cody, and so love him and think a lot of him. But so getting to know Jeff was my first say bond to the wrestling business outside of just being a fan. And then right around 2000, I forged a relationship with the Hebners, Dave and Earl Hebner, from right next door in Richmond, Virginia. And basically, I made a deal with Dave Hebner back in those days. I was in the car business back then as well. I gave Dave Hebner a car to drive in exchange for access and help with him, with relationships with other guys in the business and, arranging appearances and things like that. So, for instance, we used to have a thing here in Emporia called the Virginia Pork Festival. Big, huge, back in those days in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was a huge deal for us. So, Dave would arrange for people like a Road Dogg and Billy Gunn and Big Boss Man and Ron Simmons and John Layfield and all these people to come do appearances for me at these types of events. Later on down the road, I ended up giving Dwayne Johnson a car to drive. And in turn, he did all my TV commercials for my car dealerships, for a
Wow.
couple years. And so started with that. But I never had any desire at all to wrestle. And if it wasn't for Jeff and Jerry Jarrett, I never would. But when Jeff and Jerry started, TNA Wrestling, back right around 2000, you probably know the dates better than I do. But when they first started it, Jeff reached out to me as a friend and said, "Hey, Jeff and Jerry at the beginning were doing this basically out of pocket. That's before investors came in, and certainly before Dixie Carter came in with an influx of cash. So Jeff and Jerry were doing this out of pocket, and Jeff and Jerry used to come up every winter right after the first of the year and deer hunt with me and my brother. And so Jeff asked me the year prior to them doing this. He said, "Hey, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but my dad and I are gonna, start TNA Wrestling. We're gonna start off with Wednesday night pay-per-views, and we've got this business plan." I said, "Well, Jeff, how can I help?" And he said, "What we really need is to try to find or attain some crossover media or some mainstream media with other sports outside of wrestling that, quite frankly, we don't have the money to buy." So initially, I just told him, I said, "Hey, once you get going, I'll bring some of my NASCAR buddies to the shows, and we can do some skits and do some things backstage to try to garner some mainstream media coverage, in the NASCAR world and mainstream TV stations and all that." So I started out with me and my buddy Sterling Marlin. We went to some of the shows. We did a little angle, and that ultimately blossomed into me doing actually a match with Ron Killings in Nashville at the Municipal Auditorium there. And Ron was great. I mean, I don't claim to be a professional wrestler, never have, never will. But Ron Killings was able to do enough, to make it look, it accomplished what we were trying to accomplish at that time. And that is get a rub off outside of the wrestling world. Back in those days, yeah. And Jeff and I talk about this some now. Now with social media and TikTok and X and Facebook, and there's so many other ways that you can, get your message out and promote and advertise. But back in those days, we didn't have all those things. You had to buy local cable advertising, and you had to think outside the box to get more coverage than you would normally get just from the wrestling bubble, you might say. And so we were able to do that. I was proud of that. And Ron Killings, what a great athlete he was then, and 20 years later, he still is. But we pulled it off, and we got just a little bit of a kickstart, a little bump, you might say, to try to get TNA off the ground. And of course, I stayed involved as Jeff needed me to over the course of time. And then ultimately that led me into doing some non-televised events for TNA when Dixie came on board to try to spread the brand up and down the Mid-Atlantic, because TNA at that time initially, wasn't ready to do that. So I did that for a couple of years and had a ball. I really had a ball doing it. and I wouldn't trade those times for anything.
Now, were you actually trained to wrestle as far as, with Ron Killings? Was that actually like training involved?
No, I mean we just did. I did a maybe the week before the match at another show I was at. So we were doing the pay-per-views on Wednesday nights, and so the week before we did the actual match, we did another vignette, I guess you would call it. And then after the show that night, we kind of went to the ring for a little while and kind of talked through what we wanted to do. I mean, it was maybe 8 or 9 minutes. Um, was it a perfect match? No, but in terms of wrestlers having matches with, I use this term loosely, celebrities that are not wrestlers, I think our match stands up pretty good when you put it in that genre. So, but he did it all. I mean, he we walked through it. Jeff and Jerry told us what we wanted the finish to be, and he did it all. And he found things that I could do that he could do, and that was something that I wouldn't want to do all the time, but certainly I enjoyed doing it for that one time. The fans accepted it pretty well, as I remember back in those days, and to get to work with Ron Killings was awesome, and but he carried me in a good way.
What did you think about that? Because you're transitioning from NASCAR, from race car driving to
Yeah.
wrestling. I mean, taking bumps and doing this. What did you think about that transition?
Well, a lot of things are similar. I mean, certainly in the NASCAR world, we don't take bumps, and I wasn't getting body slammed, and I wasn't taking these crazy scissor kicks and things like that Ron did to me during that match. But back in those days, I was still racing full time and doing TV. So the adrenaline of being in front of people, I was already doing that. Different arena, but same thing. The pressure that was involved, back in those days at a NASCAR race, I would go. There would be 60 cars trying to qualify for 43 spots. So 17 cars would not make the show or going home. So when it came time for my qualifying lap, I had to step up under pressure and hit my marks and and hit everything perfectly, my shift points and all that to make a qualifying lap. Same thing with my match with Ron. I mean, it certainly was different being out there live in front of all those people. And I thought back in those days I was in relatively good shape, but in wrestling terms, you knew the phrase "blow up." I blew up about 3 different times in a 10-minute match, but was able to get my breath and do all that. But there were a lot of similarities. I mean, I fed off the live audience, and I was able to not get stiff, and and I was very comfortable with Ron and what we were doing, and the story we were trying to tell, to get the job done. So I really, really, really enjoyed it. Even before that, I've always had a lot of respect for the guys and girls that do that, because I mean, I did that one match at 10 minutes and I was sore for 3 weeks, you know. And so I'm very careful to say this. I do not look at professional wrestling as fake. I look at professional wrestling as choreographed, with a determined outcome. But these guys and girls are some of the best athletes I've ever been around, and the things they can do with their bodies and the beatings their bodies take to entertain people. I've always had a lot of respect for the guys and girls in that industry.
Did it take them a lot? And like, let's say Jeff's asking you to wrestle. Does it take them a lot of like tugging your arm, like, please wrestle? Or were you jumping at it, like, yeah, all right, I'll wrestle?
No, no. Well, I knew right along from the beginning that I wanted to help Jeff and Jerry any way that I could get their promotion off the ground. For one reason, fast forward to 2023, Jeff and I, Jeff's one of my best friends. Jerry, bless his heart, is no longer with us, but I wanted to help them because I appreciated them putting their own money and reputation on the line to try something different. And the other part of it was, even prior to me doing this thing with Jeff, I had a lot of friends in the wrestling industry. And Jeff and Jerry were going to give a lot of people opportunities to make paychecks that weren't making paychecks at the time. So what I wanted to do was help them, but I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want to take away from or the match, be a distraction or a detraction. And we put together something that we thought worked. So they didn't have any trouble talking me into doing the lead up and doing the match. But they knew once we did the match that was going to be the end of that. And then I turned my attention to try to help Jeff more behind the scenes. And by that, I mean trying to nurture relationships. I was working for Fox Sports later during that time period. And Jeff obviously was on FX, for a while, Fox Sports South, whatever that was in the early days of TNA. So there were things I could help him do and meetings to help set up and all that to try to be, character witnesses for Jeff and Jerry that I was able to help do everything I could to bridge them until, Dixie came along and was able to give the organization some life at that time.
And they bring you back, right? You have another match. I think it was you and Road Dogg against Jeff Jarrett and Alan Funk, aka Bruce.
Yeah.
So I mean, they bring you
Yeah.
back for another match. They loving your in ring skills.
Yeah. I mean, and that's fun. I mean, Brian Road Dogg is same as I'm not as close with him as I am Jeff, but still somebody that I've been a friends with over the years and keep in touch with, and really proud of him, by the way, on how he has turned his life around and his family. I mean, just a great story in itself of what he's done. And I mean, I had a good time, man. For me, I was under so much pressure back in those days with racing and sponsors and all that. I mean, so I, I didn't turn them down, and we had a little bit of fun again to push the product along and try to get some, some mainstream coverage. And then later down the road, I don't remember the exact date, but once Dixie came along and got involved, there was a time period where I was doing backstage interviews called Hermie's Hot Seats interviews, where we would interview, or I would interview, talent on the TNA roster at the time. And what we were trying to do there is trying to introduce the fans to and create more personality with the talent, with people watching. And so we did that for a couple of years. And then at the end of the day, I got so busy with things that I had going on, and not only with racing and my TV career and family, and my middle daughter is special needs, and I was running car dealerships, and I just had a lot. And so there became a time when I slowed down until Jeff then did Global Force, and then I jumped back in to help him be on the board of directors for Global Force, which was somewhat short-lived before he ended up merging that back with TNA, or going back for a short period of time there, and then ultimately to WWE, and as he continued his career as well. But really proud. But all of my involvement really involvement in wrestling was because of Jeff and Jerry Jarrett.
Do you think there's a lot of correlation between like NASCAR and race car fans and wrestling?
I do, in a way that entertainment is very, very important. Although NASCAR races, there's no quote unquote script. NASCAR is in the entertainment business, just like professional wrestling is in the entertainment business. So I think putting on good shows that are not too long, that entertain people, is very important. Another similarity is it's very important. You look back, I don't need to tell you, I can look at the wall and tell a lot about behind you to know a lot about wrestling. But, a lot of what makes a successful professional wrestler has sometimes very little to do with how well they actually can wrestle. It has to do with connection with the fans and the right time and place on what the fans want, what they buy into, what they relate to, and these kind of things. And same way with NASCAR. I think that's one of the things that, since me and my brother kind of got out, I retired from that world and got off TV in 2009. from 2009, say back 2 years prior to that, '09 to 19, you know, we lost a lot of personalities in the sport of NASCAR that retired and moved on, from the Tony Stewarts to the Jeff Gordons, and you got Dale Earnhardt Jr. All these people that the fans loved and could relate to. And no offense, the newer generation of NASCAR driver, you got a chosen few, like Chase Elliott, who's getting that rub from his dad, and you got some others, but you've also got a lot of young kids that are driving these race cars now that the fans don't know, they don't understand, they don't relate to, because the personality and the rivalries are not there. And so, in those respects, NASCAR racing and professional wrestling are in a lot of ways similar. If the fans love you and connect with you, then that gives you a better chance in the NASCAR world of getting sponsors and having somebody wanting to pay you to drive a race car, because you can be successful on the track. But just like wrestling, just like NASCAR, just like golf, whatever, for every 5 people you see on Monday Night Raw or AEW, for every 5, there's probably 1,000 that athletic ability or in-ring ability. There's probably 1,000 for every 5 of those that'll never make it to that level, because they didn't have the right connection, they didn't have the right resources, they didn't get right in front of the right people at the right time, or weren't given that opportunity. And so, and those are the people in the wrestling industry I think about now. I still know a lot of people. Like, for instance, back when I was doing the TNA shows, the house shows, we had the Kevin Nashes and the Scott Steiners and the Jeff Jarretts and the Dudley Boys and Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy. Okay. But we also had the guys that would show up that morning, put the ring together, and work the first match, stay all night, take the ring back apart and load it up. And they were working for $15, $75. So, it's a wide range of people that, it takes to make it go. And I always felt a little more even obligated to, those guys and girls, because they were the ones that were just trying for an opportunity. And what I'm most proud of is people like Caleb Conley and all these other people like this that used to come to my shows. They ultimately got some opportunities to do some other things, because we put them on a stage in front of 1,000, 1,500 people on a card, with Jeff Jarrett or whoever that the main eventers, might be at that time, and got them noticed. And so that was the fun part for me, not only being around my friends who had quote unquote made it, but being around a lot of guys and girls that were, sacrificing everything to get an opportunity. And so to see some of those people, still be in wrestling and all that. I remember those first TNA shows. We had what card, and we had AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels and Elix Skipper and David Young and all these people that could tear the house down, but not many people knew who they were. And so we were able to. TNA was trying to do it on TV, but we were able to do it in a live audience 2 or 3 nights a week, 100, 200 at a time. And I remember having this talk with AJ Styles, way back when he just came out of Atlanta and we were getting him going. I said, AJ, I know this is a grind. I said, but we're reaching hundreds of thousands of people. We're just doing it hundreds at a time, and that kind of mentality. And these guys, the people I mentioned to you, like AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, on my shows. Now, I treated them right. I took care of their airfare. I put them in hotels. They were like, what? What do you mean? You're going to do all that? They weren't used to seeing all that. But these guys and girls at my shows would come out and bust their ass, whether it was 100 people or 1,100 people, whether they were on first or whether they were on last. They gave me and my promotion and the crowd everything they had every night, and I've never forgotten that.
It's amazing if you look at the UWF, right, the United Wrestling Federation, when you
Yeah.
started that, because it's like, wow, what is this? So, like, how did that really start? Because what is UWF? It's not TNA, but it is TNA. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I was doing the TNA live events. And then there came a time when TNA wanted to try to do their own live events. But by that time, I mean, we had built a following with our brand and our people in the Mid Atlantic. We were having fun with it. And as I said before, we wanted to continue to provide opportunities. So ultimately, what UWF was, United Wrestling Federation, was turned into an independent promotion, but that I could still use TNA talents, but I had the best of both worlds. I could also mix in some other talents from some other promotions. For, give you a perfect example, we did a show at the Siegel Center over in Richmond, Virginia, where we did a War Games type setup, put 2 rings up, did all that. And I had, the TNA group, which is the AJ Styles, the Samoa Joes, all that. But I also had, Ron Simmons and JBL and all these people that were active on WWE television that were friends of mine working matches together. And so we were really able to do things that other promotions were not able to do. But ultimately, TNA was at what they thought was the next step for them, which was do their own live events. I was at a point where a lot of people were depending on me, not only the wrestlers, but people I had working my shows and putting the rings together and PA systems and all these other things that we were doing, and we just wanted to keep that going. And so, myself and Earl Hebner and Brian Hebner, Dave Hebner, initially we kept the show going and kept the shows going, and there for about a couple of years we had a lot of fun and entertained a lot of people, and as I said, more importantly, created outlets for people in a tough business to make a paycheck and get themselves some exposure.
It's cool. I know up here in the Northeast, getting those DVDs sometimes, because sometimes you're like, wait a second, Samoa Joe fought Scott Steiner, like when
Yeah,
Scott Steiner was fresh, kind of like, wait, it was like, wait,
yeah,
what? When did So it was like awesome, kind of getting to see those DVDs and getting to see the matches that you're reading online and
yeah.
actually be able to see them. So I mean, you guys did some cool stuff.
We did, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had relationships with some of these people that other wrestling promoters didn't. I guess it wasn't. It was business, but it wasn't just. It wasn't just business. When Scott Steiner came to work for me, he had already been a race fan, and he'd come watch me and my brother race at Talladega and other places. And so, when Scott came in, I know other people gave me these horror stories about. I used to sell a package called Ultimate Experience, where people would pay top dollar and get to come in early and get autographs from the talent prior to the doors opening. Then once the doors opened and an intermission after the show, I'd let everybody sell their own gimmicks and stuff. But before the show, to get this quality time, it was not. I didn't want my customers that had already paid for this ticket to pay more money for other things. And everybody told me, "Oh, Scott Steiner would never do that. He's going to sell his merch." But Scott did it, and because we had a relationship. Same thing with, they were people like Bubba Ray Dudley, that I had a relationship with. Well, he never believed in heels coming out and signing autographs. He didn't think that the heels were supposed to come do that, but ultimately we negotiated and I said, okay, the heels go here, the baby faces go here. But guess what? If we don't provide a good value to these people that are buying our highest price ticket, and if we don't give them what we are advertising, if we don't deliver for them, this is not going to last very long. And so ultimately everybody got it. We found a way to make everything work. But back in those days, I'm not sure about now. I don't follow it as close. But there were very few promotions. I dare say we were the only promotion that was running. We went up to Philadelphia, and back down through, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, a little bit in Georgia, Tennessee. There wasn't anybody in the independent circuit doing what we were doing. And by that, I mean, running Friday night and Saturday night, giving everybody 2 shows on a loop. I paid for everybody's airfare, hotels. I did catering at all the bill. I ran my shows just like what I saw when I was backstage at Raw or TNA or whatever. And ultimately, the guys and girls appreciated that. And so we had some of the best shows that I ever remember being around. And to your point, some of the most interesting. I'd had the Steiners against the Hardy Boys one night.
Oh,
I had the Steiners against Team 3D one night, down in Wilmington. So, and I had heard all along from Bubba Ray and Scott, we won't do that match on an indie show. We're not, the Steiners and Team 3D are not going to wrestle and give that match, and we did it, and so we were able to put some really cool stuff together that I enjoyed. The people that came to the shows enjoyed, and again, ultimately, it was a win-win for everybody, and that's how things have to be to have long-term success.
and I know I went to a couple of those shows when you guys ran the ECW arena in Philly, when you guys were in Wayne, New Jersey, of all places. I remember I went to a couple of those shows. So I mean, they were great. I mean, it's basically you get this TNA house show. Smo Joe's in the main event.
Yeah,
Jeff Jarrett's getting booed out of the building. I mean, it was a great show. But I mean, I think I went to three, two at the ECW arena and one in Wayne. So great
yeah,
shows.
yeah. One night we were up in at the ECW arena, and I walked away for something and walked back in, and they had thrown 250 folding chairs in the middle of the ring
Yes.
um, and scared everybody to death. Um, but I tell you, we had fun, man, and when you have fun, people are being entertained, and we found a little niche. We found a show layout and a niche, and I found a little group of people that that I could depend on, and I look back now and giving Samoa Joe those opportunities and giving Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Jerry Lynn, all these people, Chris Sabin. And on the flip side of it, if you look back to early 2000s, I don't remember, but Jeff Hardy went through a time when he was having some personal problems and he was missing shows and wasn't showing
Yep.
up and all that, and and so I booked Jeff, who I knew, and booked Jeff to come to a show in Norfolk to kind of make his first appearance for us in UWF. And I mean, everybody on the roster, including Michael Buciccio at High Spots and all these people said, I'm not putting Jeff Hardy on a poster because he's not showing up for anybody. He's not doing what he's supposed to do. I said, Jeff Hardy will be in Norfolk on that Friday night. You can count on it. And he was. And he ended up working a lot of shows. And that was the kind of way for Jeff to ease back into, the business, because I took care of him. And he rode with me. Him and his wife, Beth, rode with me, from show to show and things. And I took care of him. And just a lot of things, like that we were able to do because I wasn't quote unquote a wrestling promoter. I was more than that. I was a friend to a lot of these people, and that was really cool.
Right, definitely. And when you're looking at it too, it's like not let's not say you're a celebrity per se, but I mean people know you, recognize you, very familiar with you. You're not going to cheat anybody. I mean, it's one of the things like a mutual respect kind of thing.
Yeah, and I had mutual respect for them too. I mean, let's be honest. I think having people like Jeff Jarrett and Road Dogg and Jerry Jarrett at the time, to have people like that, Bob Ryder, all these people that I knew that could tell these people, if you go work Hermie's shows, you're gonna get paid. You're not gonna be asked to do anything crazy. They're gonna take care of you. You're gonna get paid. I mean, that got us off to a great start because I'm sure you've heard I've heard all the horror stories about, some of the people in this industry not getting paid properly or taken care of. And I don't know both sides to all the stories, but, I'm sure uh, it was, enough blame to go around at times. But I just wanted to provide a fun, clean environment for these people to work in. And I can't, I mean, we had fun too. And I can't, we had little bumps in the road from time to time, but every show that I can remember, everybody we advertised showed up. Everybody worked hard. We gave the fans something, and I tell you, if I hadn't been so busy, with my life back in those times, I would have liked to continue to do those. But the way I had to, the reason my shows were successful, the talent first and foremost, but the reason why financially I could make them work was I had to go into each town individually and work the towns back in 2000, 2001, 2, 3, 4. I had to take a couple days and fly or drive to these towns and get sponsors and sell meet and greets. I mean, it wasn't like I said, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have X. The only way to get a town energized about a show was to go business to business in these towns, and that's what I did. Because people like, well, man, because we had a dud once in a while, but in most cases we filled the place up, we filled them up, and a lot of it had to do with the talent, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that I carried a little team, and we went door to door to door to door to door, making sure people knew we had that show coming and who was coming and what was going on, and we worked it hard. It wasn't easy, but to see those shows full, especially with the kids, they that put a smile on everybody's face, including mine.
Did you have any sort of relationship with Dixie at all? I know you said you're good friends with Jeff, but what about Dixie Carter?
Yeah, well, I met Dixie when she came in. Dixie was initially hired to do PR and marketing for Jeff and Jerry. Actually, she's one of her company, which is called Trifecta Entertainment. Her company initially was interviewed to be the public relations marketing arm of TNA. And then long about that same time, and I forgot the name of it, maybe Health South, or it was a company that had already agreed to invest and fund TNA to really finance the promotion for a couple of years. And then right in the middle of Dixie and all that company pulled out. So Dixie ultimately, over the course of time, got her family involved and transitioned from being just the marketing and PR arm to actually being an investor and ultimately owner of TNA. And so I met Dixie, if not the first day she was there, not long after that. And I've liked Dixie since the first day I met her. Um, I'm great friends with her. I'll tell you, I still stay in communication with her off and on today. I do not understand. I know, her some of her decision making over the years, especially as it relates to Hulk Hogan and Bischoff and some of these other people. People question all that, and I know her relationship with Jeff has had it ups and downs, and but when you get money and egos and things like that involved, but I'll just say this, as it relates to me personally, Dixie was always good to me. She's the one that ultimately hired me to do those Hermie's hot seat segments. Um, she was always really good to my family. And I'll go back and say something that I said before. I would always see people complaining or making negative comments about Dixie, what she did to TNA. She tried this, she didn't do this, she should have done this, she shouldn't have done that. And I just have a different view of all that. I'm like, okay, this lady and her family came in and invested millions of dollars to give life to a promotion that I said before, like with mine, was giving hundreds of people a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, whatever. And it's her money, her family's money. Let her do what she wants to do. If she wants to bring ABC in, let her bring ABC in. And so I just never got into the, should she have pushed Jeff out? Because I mean, I talked to Jeff every day back in those days. Jeff was doing like 5 different jobs, you know.
Right.
So, but when Jeff gets pushed out, then she's got Hogan and she's got Bischoff and she's got this executive and that executive, and all of a sudden she's paying 4 or 5 people to do the job that Jeff was doing. And I don't have any ill will towards any of these people, but I was not, Dixie didn't ask me my opinion of all that. So I think a lot of people owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Dixie Carter. Was she the best ever wrestling promoter? You can argue that she wasn't. Did TNA fall short of what it could have been had they made different decisions? You can argue that it probably would have, but I just don't. I don't get into questioning or talking derogatory about somebody that had good intentions. She had a good heart. She paid a bunch of people a lot of money. And if it hadn't been for Dixie Carter, TNA would have died on the vine before it ever got to legs enough to survive through the years and the ownership changes and the name changes. We're still here in 2023. And guess what? TNA is back.
Yep.
And it's still alive. And call it what you want to. But none of that would have happened if Dixie Carter and her family hadn't been ready, willing, and able to come in and invest millions and millions of dollars at a time when, if they didn't have that, TNA probably would have been dead in about 30 days.
What do you think about the return of TNA? Is that interesting or what?
I
As
think
far
it's
as them
great.
bringing the name back?
I got to be honest with you. I don't watch wrestling at all as much as I used to. I still keep up with, Jeff and Matt, some on AEW, the Hardys, and Jeff Jarrett, because I'm still personally close with him. But I haven't watched a Impact / TNA show probably in 5 years. But I did hear and read about the name change and all that. And I mean, it was a cool name, niche, whatever you want to call it. It got people's attention. It got people to ask questions about exactly what it was, and so um, anything to keep it going, and you know. But at the same thing, I'm talking about Dixie. On social media, I see some of the same things being said about Tony Khan. He can't do this. He shouldn't do this. Why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? I can't believe he's doing this. Like, it's his money.
Exactly.
So, at some point in time, people would be better off if they just, stop trying to be everybody can't be an expert. And, now I'm in the convenience store and truck stop business. Somebody has to be ultimately responsible for the company, for the success and the finances. And in this company, it's me. So I'm going to make decisions that I think are right for my company, my family, and my employees. And Dixie Carter had every right to do that. Tony Khan has every right to do that. Again, I look at it like, look at all my friends that are still collecting nice paychecks in the wrestling business because of Tony Khan. God bless him.
Yep.
I would never, I don't care what anybody says, I would never question anything that Tony Khan is doing. And I see all that. And you got all these experts that most of them that I know of have probably ridden a wave to the heights of the sport, but have also either gotten fired or been a part of organizations that were sold or went bankrupt. So nobody's perfect.
Right.
So these people that know it all, they make me chuckle sometimes.
When you look at just like race car drivers and guys from NASCAR and different parts of racing coming into wrestling, do you find it interesting? Like your brother, was involved, obviously Elliot, different guys throughout the years, Jeff Hammond, right? I mean, he was involved.
Yeah.
Do you find it that a lot of race car guys are just wrestling fans, or they want to get involved in the business?
Well, I think it's more so the fans, but I did have a group of my brother, of course, he drove the WCW car
Oh yeah, that's right.
back in
Yeah.
his early NASCAR days.
Yep.
He had Sting on it one time, and Hulk Hogan maybe one time. The black NWO car one time. Kyle Petty drove a Busch Grand National car one
Yeah,
time.
I
But
was going to mention Kyle. Yeah,
yeah,
former
yeah,
NWO member Kyle Petty.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And then there were lots of times. I say lots, probably 4 or 5 times. I remember Martinsville being one. Where we did shows during race weekends. I remember being at Martinsville one weekend. Right across the street from the racetrack was a old abandoned Walmart building, and so we did a wrestling show across the street from the Speedway. And I had Jeff Hammond and Michael Waltrip and Jamie McMurray and all my buddies coming over. Some of them participated in matches. I mean, Jeff Hammond just loved it. I mean, he loved the physicality of it. He's an old rodeo boy, so he loved it. But there's a lot of synergy between the two. But then you get some of the people, the Jeff Gordons of the world, what is that?
Yep.
But there are a lot of people in my day that enjoyed it, watched it, followed it. In the late '90s, early 2000s, I mean, wrestling was hot. I mean, it was
Yeah.
it was cool then. You could everybody could go to a Monday Night Raw or a WCW, and you know, and it was the cool thing to do. I mean, back in those days, I remember all my race team. We used to go to like Monday Night Raws in Charlotte and things back in late '90s, early 2000s. I mean, it just sold out buildings, and I mean, back when Steve Austin and Rock and all them were, I mean, it was hard to believe how hot things were at that time, and so. Um, but I've been off the road in NASCAR since 2019. So I don't know as much about the new generation of drivers and what they like and all that. But in my day, a lot of my friends that I hung out with, it was we all loved it, enjoyed it. It was entertaining, and some of those guys and girls would come out and watch me race. Mickey James is one of my best friends. She used to live right over here in Richmond, next door to me. She's out in Nashville now with Nick, but I mean, she's been to watch me race many times over the years, and so and that's what I'm most proud of this day is, I did lots of things in wrestling from say late '90s, and still to this day, and I don't have a quote unquote enemy in the business, maybe other than Vince McMahon, but as far as the talent part of it, have a lot of great friends and still friends to this day.
Not a fan of Vince, or Vince isn't a fan of you? Is that right?
Not a fan of Vince. We give you the short version, but right around 2000, I mentioned before that I had a deal with Dwayne Johnson. I provided him a Cadillac to drive. At this time, he was living down in the Miami area, Davie, Florida area. But anyway, I went to race at Homestead, maybe in '99 or maybe 2000. And he was married. His wife at that time, her name was Danny. She was an investment banker. Anyway, they came to Homestead to the NASCAR race, loved it, fell in love with it. So shortly after that, Rock and I started talking about. He said, "I'd love to maybe get involved in NASCAR." So I won't bore you with all the details, but over the course of the next several months, we and/or I put together a partnership for Dwayne and I to co-own a NASCAR team. And we had gone so far, I had bought a building, I was building race cars, all these kind of things. And for reasons I have yet to be told or don't quite understand, 20 plus years later, Vince put the kibosh on all of that and put me and Rock in a difficult position. So, although 20 years later, Rock probably could have done something about it, being where he's at in his life now. That little fiasco cost me about $800,000.
Oh,
Um,
Jesus Christ.
yeah, because I had to liquidate all the things that I had purchased and done, and but it's one of those things, that I assumed wrongly that Rock was covering things on his end with Vince and otherwise, and had been told that, but and Vince did one of those things that I guess he was known to do over the years. Is he's not doing this, we're not doing this, and sue me if you want to, because he's got attorneys on, on a retainer and standby. So ultimately, I've sold and liquidated, and I've that was 23 years ago, and I'm still doing fine. So, but it didn't have to be handled that way. And um, although was not obligated to, and is still not obligated to, it is a little bit disappointing that that Rock, never reached out, or you know anything I can do. Can I help in any way? Nothing. I haven't. I saw him maybe about 3 weeks after all the blow up with Vince. Saw him. I think he was maybe waving the green flag at a race at Texas or something. I can't remember. But all he would say to me was, "I know you hate me, and I'm sorry." And I haven't talked. That's been 20 years ago, and I haven't talked to him since.
Oh, wow. Damn. All stemming from that Cadillac. Oh, wow.
Well, it started with the Cadillac deal was fine. I mean, I provided him a car to drive, and he was doing commercials, and I assumed that Vince knew about that too. But when I thought that obviously Rock and Vince were talking about the NASCAR deal all along, because that's what was being represented to me. In fact, I was even working with people in the WWE or WWF at that time, merchandise department, artwork department. We were developing and designing clothes and T-shirts for Team Rock Racing, and I mean, we did a lot of stuff. You know.
Wow.
Then ultimately, I get a call or maybe an email. I think back in those days, maybe a fax from
Yes.
Jerry McDevitt, Vince's attorney, and saying, "This is we're putting an end to this, and do not contact Dwayne Johnson under any circumstances." It left me holding the bag, and so um, I could either try to minimize my damages or try to fight them, and that's a losing proposition. Most anybody who's tried to sue them know that's a losing proposition. So I worked it out. I took my lump, learned my lesson, and um, probably learned more in that episode than I did in 4 years of college. So uh, I found a way to work it out. So it's all good.
As we wind it down here, we head towards the finish. What is next for you? What do you got coming up down the pike?
Well, I'm just really, really busy now. I can't get NASCAR racing completely out of my blood. I have a good friend of mine who is a Virginia State Senator, Bill Stanley. Bill Stanley and I together own a open wheel modified race team that we race in the Smart Modified Tour and the NASCAR Wheeling Modified Tour. And my two drivers are two of my old buddies from my racing days, Bobby Labonte and Ryan Newman. They drive my cars for me. So I'm still involved in racing, and still doing that. But I go now to the racetrack when I want to and not when I have to. So that's fun. But outside of that, my oldest daughter, Cora, I think I mentioned, just had my first granddaughter about a month ago. So I'm enjoying that. My middle daughter has autism. So she's always a top priority of mine and my wife's these days. And my youngest daughter, Naomi, is now a junior at Randolph-Macon College over in Ashland, Virginia, and she plays on the softball team. And she and her team have had two great years. They've made it this past year. They made it one out away from making it to the College World Series. So I've really enjoyed And my oldest daughter that just had the baby, she was a cheerleader. So right now I'm just enjoying my kids, enjoying my family, looking after my business. I've got about 320 employees across our different platforms of businesses, and this business environment. I'm not sure up there where you live, but down here is really, really tough. Inflation is real here, and the labor market is really, really bad right now, and a lot of challenges for small businesses down here in Virginia. But we're fighting and clawing and scratching and trying to do the right thing, and but looking after my businesses and spending time with my kids and making up for lost time for the 30 years that I was on the road traveling. I'm trying to make up for lost time now.
What about wrestling wise? Anything wrestling coming up?
Other than um, last year when I went out to Nashville for the Michael and Daryl Waltrip charity event. So, I worked with Mike, of course, raced with Daryl and Michael Waltrip for years. And even since I retired from TV, I still participate in the Waltrip Brothers Charity Championship. They do it every year. They host it out in Nashville. It's a fundraiser for Motor Racing Outreach, which is a church group that travels to the NASCAR tracks, that babysits all the drivers' kids while they're racing, for lack of a better term, and
Right.
does Bible studies and those kind of things. Michael and Darrell still do fundraising events for them. So every year when I go, I always stay with Jarrett's. So Cody, who's actually his dad is, Kurt Angle, but Cody, um, that lives with Jeff and Karen, loves wrestling and loves to wrestle me when I go. So the last two times I've been, we actually the last time out there we actually did a match outside on the trampoline, Cody
Nice.
versus Hermie, and actually Jeff was special guest referee. But maybe not supposed to say this on the podcast, but Cody's go-to move is a kick to the nuts. So uh, unfortunately, our match was a no DQ. But I had fun doing that. But I'm not involved in any way, shape, or form in a business way. But I see Jeff and Karen and Cody came when my daughter got married last year. They flew down, for that, and I flew out there for Jeff's daughter's graduation, and I flew out, when Jeff's dad passed away, to spend a couple of days with him and all that. But I'm not involved in any kind of business part. And Jeff Hardy and his wife Beth and daughter Ruby came. We went to see Duke and Carolina play football a couple Saturday nights ago in Chapel Hill. So still doing some of the stuff with some of my friends, but not involved in a business way at all. Got too much else going on.
Did you get the win or did Cody get the win, most importantly?
Come on, man. You know better than that.
Damn. You should
It
have
was not a chance.
damn, you should
Not a
have
chance.
pulled a heel tactic. Damn.
It's on YouTube somewhere. Karen Jarrett uploaded the match on the YouTube, but man, inside of Jeff's house the day before, we had a pretty intense contract signing.
Nice.
Jeff drew us up a contract, and so Cody and I signed a contract, and then we had the national anthem, and I had me a suit on, and Cody, but it was false count anywhere, and I forgot what Jeff called the match, but basically, last man standing. Basically, we had falls everywhere, in the lake, on the pier, on the trampoline, but it was who couldn't get up, to a 10 count, who couldn't answer the bell. Excuse me, on 10 count was the loser. And Cody got me one of those patented, ball shots. And I was legitimately down for the count, but I love Cody, and they've got he's a little bit of sunshine, but always enjoy spending time with the Jarretts when I get a chance.
Awesome. Now, where can everybody find you? Social media and otherwise.
Well, I've got I keep want to say Twitter, but X account. It's just at Hermie Sadler, HermieSadler, and then I've got a Facebook account. I don't have Instagram or what's the other one? TikTok. I don't have anything like that. Just X and Facebook, and that's all I need these days. I don't need to keep up with anything other than my wife and kids and friends. But um, I appreciate the opportunity to be on and catch up, and I hope people enjoy listening.
Awesome, Hermie. Thank you so much for all the time. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Talk to you soon. Have a good Christmas.
You too.